Arcade Heroes.
Greetings, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com, and we've got some more retro arcade remake news, and as well as Atari arcade remake news, as a 1983 somewhat obscure classic is getting the remake treatment with Food Fight Frenzy. Now, if you don't know what Food Fight is, well, here's the flyer. This game was released in March of 1983, which is right after the industry had taken a nosedive off of the financial cliff and headed into the great game crash of the time. Although, as I've recently learned, it was 1984 was when the bottom really was, beginning in 1985 as well. But this is a game where it's actually Charlie Chuck's Food Fight. It was designed by General Computing Corporation, who are the same guys who came up with Miss Pac-Man, the crazy auto hack. And they had a deal with Atari where they would create games, and this was one of the first ones that they did for them. But you would, playing as Charlie Chuck, a kid, you would run from the right side of the screen over to the left side of the screen to grab the dripping ice cream cone. And as the ice cream cone drips and becomes smaller, so does the bonus. It's kind of a timer of a sort, and also trigger to end the level. Now, of course, there's obviously something in between the two there, otherwise it'd be a pretty boring game. And that something was some pits that these chefs would pop up out of, and then there was also piles of food. And every wave would have differences in what the food was, but either way, that was your weapon. You would grab a piece of food and use that to hit one of the chefs as you made your way over. Of course, if you wanted to, you could avoid fighting at all, and you could just try and weave your way around and get to the ice cream cone, and that you get the bigger bonus that way, but not as many points from hitting the chefs in the face with a pie. And so that's the basic game there. And now, what about this new one? Well, the Food Fight game, as I mentioned, it's a little bit obscure. There was a recent remake, but other than that, the IP has been kind of ignored throughout the years, excepting two ports that happened in 1987, one to the Atari 7800 and one to the Atari XEGS, although that would be one that probably had the least amount of sales just because the XEGS was kind of a flop. But Food Fight Frenzy is being designed by two companies, and it is officially licensed from Atari. So the hardware side is being dealt with by Retro Arcade Remakes, and they created the Taito's Ice Cold Beer Remake, which I've covered on the channel a couple of times. And then the software is being done by Slackers Inc. Now, Slackers, they just joined Arcade Heroes as an advertiser, so welcome to the site there. And so if you're an arcade operator, take a look at that and see if what they have will fit your fancy. They already do have an arcade game that they've had out for several years now called Galactic Battleground. That's also one that I've covered on the channel previously. That one's kind of like Galaga, but up to 4 players, but it has several differences from Galaga, so it's not a Galaga remake or ripoff. It's its own thing. But in this case, this is, again, an official port. Has Atari's blessing and everything, although from a video that Joe of Slackers posted to Indie Arcade Wave, where he interviewed Brian of Retro Arcade Remakes and then Kelly at Slackers, this has been kind of in the works since 2019, at least when Brian first had the idea and first started talking to Atari about it. But Atari wasn't really receptive to it until they got a new CEO by the name of Wade Rosen. If you followed any Atari news, Wade's really been turning things around for the company. He's like the first CEO that they've had who's really cared about the brand in an extremely long time. And so he loves retro games, and so something like this is just kind of a natural fit for what they want to do. And so the idea for Food Fight Frenzy kind of came out of Atari's Warlords. Retro Arcade Remakes, as I've also shown on a couple of recent videos about them, they've been developing a new version of Warlords, mainly the cabinet. The game, they haven't really changed much, just sped it up and a couple of other small changes. I'm not sure when that game is actually going to be launching, but Food Fight Frenzy, it is definitely supposed to be coming this year. Also, not sure exactly when yet, but it will be playable today. So if you're in, I believe it's Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you're hitting up the Midwest Gaming Classic, then you will have a chance to be one of the first people to play Food Fight Frenzy, as that's where it's making its debut. I don't know the exact booth area. I believe it is supposed to be situated where you're going to see a bunch of arcade machines. However, as my understanding is that Joe from Indie Arcade Wave will be setting, or has set up an area focusing on indie arcade games and all that. And so Galactic Battleground will be there. So if you want to check that one out, you can. And then, of course, Food Fight Frenzy. And now I do not have any photos of the cabinet yet, and so I'm waiting for that. Once I do get those photos, then I will make a post on Arcade Heroes that may have a little bit more information in regards to this. But with this video here, you can see exactly what it's all about. That, as you probably did already notice, so this is very similar to the original Food Fight. Aesthetically, it's exactly the same, other than maybe these colored pointers that help the player know which one of the players is theirs. But otherwise, the chefs pop up, and you looks like you want to take them out as soon as you can, so they don't have a chance to grab the food and then take you out. And then it becomes a free-for-all where you want to hit one of your opponents. And at least by what I can tell, as soon as somebody gets pelted with a piece of food, then the round's over. Or if they run into one of the chefs. And so yeah, and this will be in a cocktail cabinet, and so that's why the visuals are set up in that way. In many ways, I believe it's supposed to be like Pac-Man Battle Royale, which I have sitting right there, which uses a similar setup just with Pac-Man and those power-ups. And I think that this would be aiming at the same market segments that Pac-Man Battle Royale did, where it's not necessarily going to be the thing that FECs are looking for, but bar arcades, or perhaps we should start just calling them game bars, and retrocades out there would be looking at something like this. Of course, this does not have anywhere near the name brand recognition of something like Pac-Man, but perhaps people will overlook that, even though it's not necessarily an IP that most have heard of. Just seeing the concept, and oh, I get to throw food at somebody else and can throw food at my friends. Perhaps that will overcome it. But the game hasn't been tested yet. The appearance at Midwest Gaming Classic is the first public appearance. And then I believe from what Joe said, they will be doing some on-site, in-venue location tests sometime here soon. And then that also might determine when this hits manufacturing, hits production. So my best guess, since they weren't able to provide dates yet, I mean, obviously it's going to be released when it's ready, but perhaps this summer, maybe at the latest this fall, which if it does happen in the fall, have it competing with Asteroids Recharged, which will also be at Midwest Gaming Classic, but that's by a completely different company. I mean, it's still licensed through Atari, but that one's done by Alan One, and I recently covered that. But interesting little trend of seeing these Atari games all coming back to the scene. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. And again, stay tuned to arcadeheroes.com for a post on this that should have some more information. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.